Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. My new friend David is joining me, who has a very cool Bruce Springsteen Hawaiian print shirt that I am
Absolutely.
very jealous of.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
made by an outfit called Printable. You can get it online. That's where I picked this one up.
I will have to go check that out.
All
So,
right.
David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little about yourself.
All right. I've been a Bruce fan for 50 years now. Just as we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Born to Run album, that was the album that turned me into a fan. I grew up in Neptune, New Jersey, right next to Asbury Park, so it was in the air at the time, you could argue. Saw my first Bruce show with my brother in 1978 at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey. Second night of a three-night stand. First night broadcast on WNEW-FM. And the second night, you can find audio and video from that as well. And so I've just been building on it ever since.
That sounds great. You've answered one of my questions, but let's start at the beginning. You mentioned growing up in Neptune. What kind of music was your family listening to? What did you grow up hearing?
It's funny. I didn't get Bruce from my family as much as I did on my own. I mean,
Okay.
I had a stereo in the basement. I listened to WNEW FM in New York. That was after having been younger and started out with WABC on the AM band. But the WNEW certainly was playing their fair share of Springsteen music in the mid 70s. And that's really where I got exposed to it first. And it all built from there.
How about your parents? What did they listen to?
It's funny because I don't know that they were especially music fans. They did have a piano in the house. My mother had played growing up, so there was that. But one time I tried to learn and never really got anywhere with it. I can remember things like my dad actually built the house that we grew up in with my grandfather. And one of the things he built into the finished basement was a bar. So I remember behind the bar, there was an old 78 album of the South Pacific soundtrack. Why I
Okay.
remember that, I have no idea, except for the fact that I ended up with it after they both passed.
Yeah. My parents were really into music. My father loved country music, as did my mom. My mom also had a big love for Fats Domino and Bobby Darin and that early rock and roll. Yeah.
For me, it was something I picked up on my own. If you want to talk about my family, maybe a better reference point in terms of music is my great aunt and great uncle. They
Okay.
collected antiques. They had everything going back to the very beginnings. That were pitted so you could hear the music played on the machine. They even had a player piano from 1915, the kind with the rolls. And
Yeah.
actually, it's in my house now. And it's been there since 1998 when I bought the place, basically. I had been in the family before then. I got it, had it restored. It's sitting here. Now I have to figure out what to do with it next. So, that's the thing about those
That's
kind of
great.
old instruments. It's all right, what are you going to do now?
David, you are the second person this week that talked about making that leap from AM to FM. I not sure where I am compared to you. I was born in 59,
Right.
graduate high school in 77.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm a year older.
okay. And I never turned to FM growing up in Louisiana. My
Mhm.
dad was in the army. We moved around a lot. I never controlled any music at all. Just listened to what my parents wanted to. In the
Yeah,
car, they picked the albums. But
right.
once you got that AM clock radio, I
Yeah,
was then able to control my listening. But I
yeah.
never moved to FM. I think it was because the druggies listened to FM. And I was a top 40 kid. And so
Yeah.
I wanted the songs that you could sing with.
That's why I started out in the early 70s. And then by the mid 70s, I moved into FM. And like I say, WNEW in New York, that was the station at that time. And let's face it, among other things, they played the Springsteen show at the Bottom Line in August of 75. There
Yeah.
were shows after that. And of course, his music showed up on the radio, and that's really where I got exposed to it first.
So there was not a road to Damascus moment where you went, this is my guy, or were you just listening and started picking up songs, David?
It started out being familiar with the album and getting a sense of his music from there. But if you want to talk about the road to Damascus moment, I would say it was the first concert.
Okay, let's
Talk
share.
about that with David Barry, and you can hear me in the new movie Tramps Like Us, specifically the fact that I took my brother to the show. Now, my brother's an artist of sorts. He's an architect. He's been that way for decades. And before the show, he had drawn a caricature of Bruce with his initials on it and our hometown, Neptune, New Jersey.
Okay.
So there's a break after Spirit in the Night. People are going up to the stage and handing him all kinds of things. So my brother makes a break for it, goes up to the stage and hands him this drawing. And Bruce says, and we've got the video to prove it, I got all this stuff. And the first thing he says after that is, I got something from Neptune here. Sure enough, Gary Talent, who had gone to Neptune High School, you can see him in the video pumping his fist at the mention of Neptune. So if you want to talk about a road to Damascus moment, that was about as good as it got.
That is amazing.
It is.
So I'm going to get to the David's movie and talk about that, but you've already talked about that hearing him live
Yeah.
was that road to Damascus moment.
Yep.
I always like to call, and I have the same feeling, except I didn't see him till 2002. I was an on and off fan. And then once I saw him live, it's okay. Katie bar the door, as they say. This is
Absolutely.
it. I like to preface, though, the amount of times you've seen Bruce is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are.
Right.
But are you someone who counts?
I went back, I got a list. To prepare for this appearance, I went back and looked at it, and it says I've seen 44 concerts of his. But bear
Okay.
in mind, I grew up on the Jersey Shore. And Bruce, when I was in my teens and 20s, he would pop up at local clubs. So there were several times that I saw him in that context, and not necessarily even on stage, at the club, so to speak. My best story in that regard, there was one
Please.
night, Big Man's West, the club that Clarence Clemens had in Red Bank. My fiance, later my first wife, we've since divorced, she was following around Sonny Ken and the Wild Ideas. It was a band at the time. Sonny was like the guitarist in the mid 60s on the Jersey Shore when Bruce was just starting out. So
Okay.
there was a sort of connection there. And my girlfriend at the time, she got to know the manager of Big Man's West, a woman named Bonnie Ryan. So one night she finds out, yeah, Bruce is going to be there. Now, my brother, he's back in the story again. He had actually done a painting of the Born to Run album cover, black and white, the whole deal, really reproducing Eric Miola's photograph. So
Okay.
I put it in the back of the station wagon. I bring it down to Red Bank at Clarence Clemens Club, Big Man's West. We set it up in the office, which is right inside the door. And then we back away. Bruce comes in, talks to Bonnie, sees the painting. He loves it, and he signs it. And we're not talking some scribble like you'd see at the Broadway shows.
Yeah.
They're printing every letter. My mother would not let that out of the house for the next 15 or so years until she
Yeah.
it actually stayed there until my father died several years later. And at that point, my brother was able to get it, bring it back with him to his home. He lives in Jacksonville, Florida now. That's where.
Okay. What are some other stories from shows that you might want to share?
I don't know. It's hard to think of them. I'm more focused on the things that weren't at shows.
Okay, talk to
I'll give
me.
you one example there.
Please.
Late 70s, like I said, was going to school at Monmouth College, now Monmouth University. They just hosted a Springsteen Symposium and everything
Yes.
with it. Okay. So nearby was the Monmouth Mall. And I remember one time going into the Sam Goody record store at the Monmouth Mall, and there's Bruce. He's looking through the country section, and this is pre-Nebraska. So
Okay.
he's just starting to broaden out his musical taste. And I mean, there was an understanding for people on the shore at that time. You could watch Bruce, you could look at what he's up to, but if you try to approach him, you might not get what you want out of that encounter. Okay, so just standing there and flipping through the stacks and watching him. And sure enough, he buys a few things and then he walks around the corner to a bookstore. And I want to say it was either B. Dalton or Walden Books, one of the mall-based stores. And sure enough, he finds his way to the back of the store. And I see three other people who realize, oh my God, it's Bruce.
Yeah.
And they run in there and go after him. And at that point, I left because it was really just an understanding, whether in that context or if you saw him in one of the clubs like the Stone Pony or the Fast Lane, and also in Asbury Park at the time at Big Man's West, as I already mentioned. You gave him some space. You did not do the whole fan thing and jump all over. Oh my God, Bruce, I love you. No, especially not if you're a guy. Come on.
I've talked about this before. One of my I'm a big geek. I've loved Star Trek all my life. I do a Doctor Who podcast.
Yeah.
I've read comic books since I was 3 or 4. And one of the comic book conventions I go to when Bruce isn't touring is Dragon Con. And Dragon Con's in Atlanta. It's over the Labor Day weekend. It's over 8 or 9 hotels. And they have the same feeling that because the celebrities and the stars and actors hang out at the bars, no one bothers them at night to ask for an autograph.
Sure.
They may buy him a drink, they may sit around and while they hold court, but they don't, because they know if we other conventions, they don't go out because they know they'll get mobbed. So to keep them where you can have those moments. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Like I say, the one moment where I stepped out of that, I remember there was one night at the Fast Lane, again, Asbury Park. Bruce was in there that night. I was working in Asbury Park at the time because I was at the Asbury Park Press. I did a couple of summers there, also on weekends while I was in college. And this was when the paper itself was in Asbury Park. It later moved to the suburbs. But in any case, so I hung around the door of the Fast Lane afterward and I had a copy of Dave Marsh's biography, Born to Run with Me.
Okay.
So I got Bruce to sign that. So that was my big sort of fan moment. As he's coming out of the Fast Lane after a night of hanging out and partying or whatever. And then later on, there's this series of symposia at Monmouth University, and the one that just happened was the latest, the Born to Run symposium. The first one was back in 2005. Dave Marsh was there, so I got him to sign the book too. So I have one that's signed by both the author and the subject.
Nice. That's very cool.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I got it myself. It's not when the autobiography came out. I got the box set where you actually got the autograph. And that's nice to have. You're making a purchase as opposed to having a story to tell later.
Yeah, I drove down to Austin for one of the book signings. And so I did get my 7 seconds in front of Bruce. Right. And then you picked up a copy of the book that he had signed, but not in front of you. But right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. You mentioned that you've spent time on radio and such. Talk to me. How did that part of your life happen?
I got into journalism after college because I mentioned I was at the Asbury Park Press. That's where I got started. I actually took a course there in my junior year for credit, working on the business and the real estate desk. And then I got hired on the weekends to be an editorial assistant, doing everything from going through the mail to writing obituaries. Of course, it was great in the mailroom. There was nobody there. So if there's something in particular that came in, say the Blondie single of Heart of Glass, it would walk out the door and into my collection. I can see that now. I think the statute of limitations.
I think you're clear. Yes.
All right. But anyway, so I did that through college. And then for 2 summers, I was actually a reviewer for concerts for the Asbury Park Press. Bob Santelli, who you're familiar with, the executive director of the Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music, I followed in his footsteps a little bit. I was a successor of his. I did that for 2 summers, decided that I wanted to go become a big fish in a small pond as opposed to the opposite, and ended up going to a newspaper in a town called Millville in South Jersey. The paper no longer exists. It was the smallest
Hmm.
one in the state, but I was just doing like general assignment work, police, fire, rescue, whatever, cover the local boards, you name it. And after about a year and a half of that, I got hired at Dow Jones. They were moving what they then called their electronic publishing operations to New Jersey from New York. So I ended up getting a job in South Brunswick, basically just north of Princeton.
Yeah.
So I did that for 5 years, then got transferred to New York. 1987, I was there for a few months at the Dow Jones News Service, basically their what they call their ticker. And then they had me try out for the stock market reporting job. And the first day of my tryout, I was actually out covering a conference. It was October 19th, 1987. Now, if you know your market history, that was the day of the Black Monday crash.
Oh, I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. Stocks really fell out of bed that day. And then, like I said, they had basically taken every reporter that they had, and they were actually setting up a new news wire to follow rumors at the time. So they took everybody and just threw them on the market story. So they didn't need me that day. But over the next 2 weeks, I was the one writing about what was happening in the market, getting all these gyrations in the wake of the Black Monday crash. So after that, they decide, yeah, you can cover the markets. Yeah, go ahead. And so I did that for 3 years. And then came this new business news organization. It was then called Bloomberg Business News. It's now
Okay.
Bloomberg News and has been basically since the mid 90s. It was set up by, Michael Bloomberg, who later became, among other things, the mayor of New York City for 12 years. But in any case, I became their second stock market reporter ever hired for New York. And then I went on from there. I ran a couple of news bureaus. I trained journalists. I was a columnist. I was a blogger. And then moved into radio and then ultimately television as part of that. So it's been quite a run, or it had been at least until I retired at the beginning of 2022.
What you talked about you did a paper and
Right.
and was this just a couple weekends ago at the Monmouth
I
University,
did,
the
and it's not
50th
my
year?
first, not my first rodeo either. When I
Okay.
went to the 2005 symposium, I didn't do one. I was just getting a feel for things because I'm not an academic. I'm a fan, but
Right.
I think it well. So I actually did for 2009, I did a paper, and the title was Greetings from Freehold, how Bruce Springsteen's hometown shaped his life and work. So the whole idea of what did it mean that Bruce was in Freehold? That's where he grew up.
Yeah.
Well, for example, you've got this new exhibit, Springsteen in Long Branch, and one of the things they point out is that Bruce was born in Long Branch. The reason that was there was no hospital in Freehold back then. So
Okay.
if you were giving birth, you had to go like to Long Branch or to Red Bank or to Neptune, my hometown. That's where the hospitals were.
Okay.
So that's how we ended up in Long Branch and talked about other things like that. For example, Turnpike and the Parkway were built in the 50s and they really isolated Freehold to some extent. You hear Bruce talk about how Freehold was a place where he could figure out what he wanted to be. And to some extent, it was a matter of the isolation. Train lines shut down. You had the bus into the city. That's how he'd get north and south. But it was relatively isolated at the time, that sort of thing. And then just looking at it demographically and that kind of stuff. And then the next time I looked at his foundations, right? I did a paper called Giving His Heart More Room. So he has two foundations. We know full well about the donations he gives to charities as he's touring, that sort of thing, helping food banks and that sort of thing. But he also has these foundations. And because they are public, in the sense that they have to file every year on what they're doing, you can go and trace the history. You can look at the sort of charities that Bruce has supported over time. And like I say, there was one foundation, I believe it was the Thrill Hill Foundation, where he would give to nonprofit groups. And then he had
Right.
another one, again, if memory serves, called the Foundation, where he would give to people, maybe people who grew up, who he grew up with, people in the area that needed help, that sort of thing. So that was the focus of the second paper. Third time around, I didn't even bother doing a paper. I just looked at unofficial video,
Okay.
audio and video going back to the 1970s because there was relatively little of it. Again, I mentioned in David Barry's film, Tramps Like Us, that I have for many years been collecting unofficial audio and video on behalf of the Springsteen archives. Of course, I
Okay.
keep copies for myself, but in any case,
Yeah.
pass them on. So that way, think about it. Bruce is so much of a performer. That's why he is as popular as he is in large measure. So if you don't have the performances, you really don't have the whole story. It's not
Right.
just the recorded music, the product of the studio, it's what he does live. Got the video, got the audio to some extent as well. Put it all together. What does that show you about how he's done? And also about how technology has moved forward. Think about it. Back in the 70s, all you had were like 8mm cameras, basically, for a lot
Right.
of the unofficial video, which basically meant you had no audio. And I
Right.
mean, some people have dubbed those things in, but it's clearly crude by today's standards, where everybody's got their phone and you can just
Yeah.
pick everything together and you get a really relatively professional product. And then, like I said, the most recent one, that was looking at the Born to Run house and his landlords. Okay. And the reason I decided to tackle that subject, I've known the landlordess, Marilyn Rocky, for almost 25 years.
Okay.
I served on an advisory board with her at Monmouth University. I got her to do a presentation at the 2009 symposium held at Monmouth about the house and her experience with Bruce. And I
Mhm.
had all of her notes. She literally wrote out a whole set of notes. So I
Yeah.
was able to take that and use that to cover a pretty fair part of the story. And then from there, I just went back and did research. That's how I found things like that before there was even a West End court. Back in the late 1800s, Long Branch was a rich person's playground, especially in the summer. It was a resort town, really.
Yeah.
And in 1869, a liquor baron named Samuel Pike bought an estate in Long Branch. Cost him $19,000. And you're probably thinking, yeah, that wasn't really money back then, or was it? The
That.
short answer is it wasn't, not to him. Because this
Yeah.
is a guy who built liquor businesses and also built opera houses. He built one in Cincinnati where he really made his fortune at first. That cost $500,000. He built another one
Wow.
in New York after that that cost $1 million. So $19,000 to this guy was chicken feed. Problem is, 3.5 years after he bought it, he died. He killed over in his office, died of a stroke at the age of 50. And so the
Mm.
family just kind of left it there until 1900, and this developer buys it. And then you get, among other things, the actual street, West End Court, where that house was built.
Okay.
So there you go. You
And
get me
now,
going, I just go. What can I say?
no, that's great. And you did share that you went to high school with Stan,
I
who does
did.
the tours.
Absolutely.
Yes.
He was a year behind me in high school.
Uh-huh.
He was me. He knew my brother. We both interned at the Asbury Park Press at the same time. I was on the business desk. He was on the sports desk. So, like I said, I've known him for decades. So to have a different relationship with him, being he's the Bruce Springsteen guy, and
Yeah.
I'm a fan, but not on his level in terms of taking people around and all that. It's been an interesting experience. Stan actually donated some stuff to the archives not long ago, and I actually went down to his place and grabbed things and then brought them back to my house, organized them, cataloged them, and sent them down to the archives. So
Yeah.
it was quite the experience.
What, so as you talking about the house, what you shared a little bit, but is there other things you saw as you started doing that research or that sharing from that presentation?
As far as that one in particular, it's funny how many divorces are tied into that house. And I said,
Okay.
if you go back to the 1920s, this was in a family called Sculthorpe, which is a big name in Monmouth County, maybe not known so well in other places.
Okay.
But there was a couple that lived there. Basically, the husband had been given the place by his parents after his father died.
Okay.
And he and his wife, I guess they spent summers there. The only reason I say that, I found an advertisement from 1922 when they were looking for people to like take in laundry. But a couple of years later, the house goes to the wife. And then
Hmm.
by 1930, this guy is living with another woman who he has married. It's in the census records. And then from there, you find all kinds of records that he's living. At the time in the census record, he was in Queens, but then he ended up moving to New Jersey, a town called Cranford. Okay. And so clearly this woman got the house in a divorce settlement. which I think is hilarious.
That is very funny. Yes.
Yeah, it is. She kept it for a while, sold it on to a woman who was married at the time, but was rich enough she could buy the place on her own. Her married name was Miriam Hollander. And then, several years after she buys the place, she files for divorce. Turns out her husband has gone to California and asked for $15,000 to come back. She wasn't paying it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you read, I read a story about the divorce proceedings that basically said he married her for her money.
Ah,
So there you
interesting.
go. And even Marilyn Rocky, the landlordess, when she owned the place, she was Marilyn Boyd. She had gone to Monmouth. She was part of the first class of speech and drama graduates on the undergraduate level in 1965. There were 8 of them. She married another one of them named Thomas Boyd. And they go out to the West Coast so he can get a graduate degree. They come back, they go to Washington, D.C., and then they go to New Jersey. And Marilyn, she's got quite a story herself. I mean, her
Yeah.
parents, she grew up not far from where I am in Rahway, New Jersey. Her father was the mayor of the town for 3 terms and an attorney. 6 days or so after his last term ended, he died. His
Hmm.
mother, or her mother, I should say, started out as a child star, an entertainer, and ultimately also became an attorney. Now, the father had been appointed to a county job, I believe it was a deputy registrar. Her mother took his place after he died. And there's a lot going on there. So Marilyn, she goes to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh for a year when she goes to college and then transfers to Monmouth. And 1965, everything kind of moves forward from there. But it was her mother that suggested that she invest in real estate. And together they bought 7.5 West End Court, the house that Bruce would ultimately rent from them. It was the one purchase they ever made, cost them $20,800. They each put up $1,000 of a down payment. So it was $2,000 total.
I know this sounds dumb, but like, what is there any like how did Bruce find the house? Why did he pick the house?
You
Was it
know,
just inexpensive? And
that was part of it. He could afford it. Okay. He
okay.
said he had a budget of up to $200 a month. The mortgage cost Marilyn, her mother, 130. It's okay, we can do that. All
Yeah.
right. She was working as a real estate agent in Allenhurst, a little town, New Jersey, just north of Asbury Park. Why the heck Bruce and his girlfriend at the time, I'm told Karen Darvin, better known from 75, the year after he rents the place. But anyhow, why they ended up in her office, I have no idea. But I do
Okay.
know this much. He wanted to find a place in Asbury Park. She didn't have anything, but she had 7.5. Now, Bruce knew Long Branch, especially the west end of Long Branch, which is where this house was located, named for
Yeah.
London's West End, not actually in the west end of the town geographically, but
Yeah.
anyway. All right. Yeah, it was the hip part of town. And like he played shows in the area. There was a restaurant called the Inkwell that he frequented. You know, the name Steel Mill for one of his early bands. It became Steel Mill because of a session at the Inkwell. Child at the time, they decided to change their name. That's where the Steel Mill name was decided on. Okay,
Yeah.
so he knew the area and it fit in well with him. And it was a small house. He could manage it. You know, he could get back and forth wherever he needed to go. Long Branch wasn't that far from Asbury Park, still isn't. So he could get there if he needed to. And as much as anything, it just worked for him.
The That's fascinating.
Yeah,
Why I am not someone that ever got into bootlegs. Just I have enough problem collecting comic books and books, and I don't do DVDs as much anymore because
right.
just the technology changed.
Oh, sure.
How did you start? What started you with collecting and wanting to get this data?
For me, it was about understanding Bruce's value as a performer. Again, if you don't have the audio, you don't have the video, you don't get the full sense of
Right,
who he was and what he did on any given night. Obviously, the fact that there is the official archive series of audio deals with that to some extent, but it only goes so far. So it's about
right.
everything else that goes with it. And
And
then beyond that, it was the simple impulse. If you go back to the Friends of the Bruce Springsteen Special Collection, I was on the board of that. for a couple of years before everything was turned over to Monmouth and what's now the
And
Springsteen Archives.
tell me what that is.
It was the beginnings of what today. A couple of guys, Bob Crane and Chris Phillips. Bob faded a bit from the scene, very active early in the days. Chris was the editor of Backstreets for many
Mhm.
years. And of course, that went by the wayside a couple of years back. But they had the idea that there was all this stuff that was going to be lost if it wasn't preserved in some way. They start collecting fanzines and memorabilia and whatnot. And they managed to get some space at the Asbury Park Public Library for that. Well, after a few years, they basically outgrew the library. There were some issues in terms of who owned what and what kind of condition it was in or how it was being kept. And so ultimately, that's why the collection ended up at Monmouth. It was there for a few years, sort of on a loan basis. And then ultimately, the Friends of the Special Collection decided to turn it over permanently and have it become part of the Springsteen Archives.
The I love that we're doing this. And one few years ago, my sister was coming up to Dallas to visit, and she and her husband were from Louisiana and little more conservative than I was. And they're like, I'm like, oh, what do you want to do, sis? And she goes, I'd really like to go to the George Bush Presidential Library. I'm like, sure, yeah, we'll go.
Right.
And I went, and David, I was just speechless. Just how beautiful it was, how amazing, how when you start looking at the family life and the political challenges that he had, I went, oh my goodness. So my wife and I now have gone to as many presidential libraries as you can. We've done
Right.
LBJ's, we've done Carter's, we've done Clinton's. And then 2 years ago for my birthday, they were having a special Springsteen live exhibit at the Woody Guthrie Museum in Tulsa.
Right.
So my wife and I drove up and with my son and we spent the day at the Bob Dylan and then didn't do as much of Woody Guthrie as we want. We go back. I think it's going to be great that we're going to have some place that treats Bruce's career not only for fans to be able to see, but academics as well. Any thoughts on that?
And it's interesting that Bruce has basically said, yeah, I'm part of something bigger.
Yeah,
And Monmouth, interestingly, they had for a couple of years, by the time Bruce came along, had this idea of developing centers.
mm,
So the Center for American Music was something that was in the ether at the time. And I'm sure when Bruce heard that, it's, oh, yeah, that's what I want to do. Because after all, so much of what he's done is tied into American music in one way or another. I'm
yes.
reminded of what Jon Stewart said when Bruce got the Kennedy Center honors. If Bob Dylan and James Brown had a baby and left it on the side of the New Jersey Turnpike, it would be Bruce.
Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but
yeah,
you get the idea, that you have all
yeah.
these influences and so many of them are American in one form or another.
When in as I said, my mom and dad, I was born in Louisiana, which made me smile the way. My grandparents had a dairy farm in Rose Pine, Louisiana, but there wasn't a hospital. So you had to go to Leesville to go to the
Right.
hospital. And and down south we say he hadn't forget where he came from. He hasn't
Yeah,
forgotten where he's come from. And and the opposite, he's forgotten where he comes from is one of the worst insults you could give.
absolutely.
Bruce has not forgotten where he came from.
Absolutely not. When you see pictures of him at Roberto's Freehold Grill, or you see him with his old classmates and friends at Federici's restaurant in Freehold, I've seen those kinds of things on Facebook. Heck, I've even been to Roberto's and Federici. It's fun to follow in his footsteps that way, but you're right. I mean, that he hasn't forgot where he's come from. And the whole idea was 7.5 West End Court. I love the way that Peter Carlin ended his recent book, Tonight in Jungle Land, basically talking about how Bruce, on the anniversary of the Born to Run album, would get in a car and go out and drive and play the album. And by the time he got to Jungle Land, he'd be at 7.5 West End Court, that house where he wrote most of the music for that record. That's fascinating. Of course, at the Springsteen Symposium, we found out he made that drive recently with Jimmy Iovine, who was an
Yes.
engineer on that record and, of course, went on to become a billionaire thanks to, among other things, Beats headphones. The
I
tradition goes on.
I think, yeah, and I thought that was funny when Jimmy said you peaked, when Bruce told Jimmy you peaked, which, and not only has he not forgotten, he's forgotten his friends and relatives and things, but he's not forgotten musically where he comes from. He holds and the people who did before him, right? Like he was interviewed and he told the story, and once again I may be getting it wrong, but John Lowndes said, "Hey, they're doing a tribute to Paul McCartney. Do you want to join?" And he
Mhm.
goes, "Isn't he still a Beatle?" Yeah, okay, then you don't even need to ask.
There you go.
Okay.
Absolutely. And of course, Bruce and Paul have shared a stage a few times, including one
Yes,
when they cut the power on them. Oh, yeah,
that was so funny.
it was.
Yeah, that
That's
is
how it
great.
goes. And of course, they reprise it the next time they see each other and,
Yeah,
play it off as a joke. But yeah, it's
yeah,
understandable. It's
yeah.
great, though. He does certainly pop up a lot of times. I've seen him with various people. I remember one night at the PNC Bank Arts Center. It's just off the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey. I was there to see Brian Wilson. And the tickets were cheap. I wasn't thinking about who might show up. But sure enough, we get to the encores, and who just shuffles in from the backstage? Bruce ends up playing a couple of songs with Brian and the band. And as it turned out, it wasn't the only time he'd been on stage with them. But anyhow, you can't expect these things. I heard Bruce might show up. Yeah, whatever. You
Yeah.
got so used to
And
that
there are
concept.
shirts everywhere about
Yeah,
that. Yes.
exactly. You got so used to concept. It's the one year I went to Light of Day,
Before
this
you do
was in
that,
January, the benefits.
hold that
And-
story just for a moment, if you
yeah,
could,
sure.
because I was just about to tell you
Okay.
that a few years ago, I read and saw that Bruce had gotten on stage with Brian Wilson. I was just
Yeah.
about to tell that story. And
Okay.
I made the joke that because Brian Wilson was my first musical obsession. After high school, I found
Right.
Endless Summer. I became obsessed with the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson. And I made a joke, only half kidding, that if I had been in that auditorium and saw Bruce and Brian on stage together, take me away, Lord. I don't need to see my kids get married. I don't need to
Oh,
see
geez.
grandkids.
That was it.
Yeah, that have been it.
That
So
was number one on the bucket list.
yes. All right. So
Yeah.
please tell me light of day.
All right. So the one year I actually decided to go, let's face it, Light of Day tickets aren't cheap.
No.
But I knew that Bruce might very well be there because he had a track record of showing up, even though he was never announced as a guest. The one year I go there, no Bruce. And
Yeah.
I spent the big bucks to be toward the front. It's okay. If I'll donate to your charities, but I don't necessarily need to go to the show and take the option that Bruce will show up. That's the risk you always run.
Yeah.
So many shows, you can look at them, and I come out of financial journalism. So the idea you have an option on a Bruce sighting. Okay.
Yeah.
How much is that worth to you? That
Yes,
becomes a
exactly.
question when you're buying tickets.
Yeah.
And I don't blame somebody like Stan Goldstein for saying, forget about it. He ain't coming. You go, you just enjoy the music. That's enough. Yeah,
Yes. And
because
that is what Stan would say.
yeah,
Were you there Saturday for the panels and everything?
I was there all day, heard those two songs, all of it.
So I was there too. I flew in Friday, got to see the Jungle Land film, which was pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
Really cool. And then it's there, and all day Saturday, behind all the panels are, it appears, musical instruments covered with tarps.
yep,
And I have bragged to and shared my joy that you and I and 698 other people
yeah.
getting to see those two songs was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. The moment happened. And you had the past and the present of the E Street Band and two of the three drummers. The third
Yes.
one, Vinny Lopez, had been here there earlier in the week when they had a musical performance in
Yeah.
Monmouth.
I
It's
was
Philip
wondering.
Carter and Max Weinberg on the same stage. Never going to happen again, I'm sure.
No, I did say, could they not found the snare drum and put Vinny up there on the
Oh,
side?
geez. Yeah, that would have been something. Although there was a picture taken later,
I
the
did see
on
that
Facebook
picture
of
of all
the
three of them together. Yeah.
exactly. So at least
Yeah.
you had that moment.
There we go. Based on your history, and are there any songs that you're chasing that the next time you get to see Bruce perform live, are there songs that you still are on your bucket list, David?
I don't know that I'm chasing them, but I'll tell you, my wife might be chasing them.
Okay,
Her
so
name
tell
is
me.
Sandy.
Ah, okay.
Okay. She has never seen Bruce perform Sandy in concert. Got a story for you.
Please.
The end of the reunion tour, they do the stand at Madison Square Garden. I go to three shows during that stand, including the closing night. We were behind the stage. It was terrific. But anyhow, my wife goes with me to the first one and to the last one. To the middle one, I go with my sister. He played Sandy that night. And
Oh, yeah.
I
That,
can tell you also about a one off that I saw.
please. Yes.
All right. My wife and I, Sandy, got married on July 31st, 1999. The
Okay.
next night, I had four tickets to see Bruce. I have a brother and two sisters. So my wife stayed home so my brother and my sisters could go with me to see Bruce. That night, he played Trouble River, which was released on the 18 tracks compilation.
Yeah.
It was the only time he ever played it live.
Wow.
So that was our moment.
That sounds pretty cool.
It was
Mine was we were in Houston for the tour, the
right.
first beginning of this tour.
Yep.
And so it was my wife, me, and then three of our friends that are huge Bruce Springsteen fans. Linda is a bear, just
Yeah.
one shore tour is enough for her. And she
Right.
enjoys it, she has fun. And so when he breaks out Priest, so we're going crazy, and Linda's
Oh,
what?
yeah.
So yes,
If only
that's
you knew this song's been hanging around since the 1970s and he finally put it on an album.
yeah,
Very different version, but anyway, it's
yeah,
funny. My wife is like the same way, very casual Bruce fan. And I remember the experience. We saw Springsteen on Broadway.
yeah.
Appreciated that probably more than the other shows that she's seen. As she told me later, I could actually understand the words. I mean, she was a
Yes,
journalist too, so she was a storyteller as I was. That's something that she could relate to.
yeah. So what's next, David? What do you want to do? Creatively do you want to do now? Now that you're retired, is there something else you want to do?
I keep busy. I actually take people around Ellis Island, the abandoned hospital. I do that 3 days a week. Back in the day, Bruce was honored on Ellis Island.
Yes, I remember
Yep.
that was
Called the Family Heritage Award in 2010. They stopped giving those out several years
his
ago.
his mom and his two sisters, her aunts.
Yeah,
That's
his
right,
two
the three
aunts,
of them.
absolutely, who've since all passed. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because their father came over from Italy. That's where it all came in. When you think about it. And one of the things that I looked at was just Bruce's heritage in that original paper, the Greetings from Freehold part. And because there were Dutch settling in Freehold back in the 1600s, and Springsteen is a Dutch name, but everybody thinks about the Irish and Italian of his family because that's what really predominates if you look at his makeup in essence. He's half Italian, he's 3/8 Irish, and the rest is Dutch. It's a lesser trait, you might say. But nonetheless, that's what gave him his name. And like I said, Springsteen's go so far back. And they actually, did you happen to see the exhibit that they did in Freehold at the Monmouth County Historical Association? It was called, I believe, His Hometown. And it played up all the history, including, I think he had an ancestor who fought in the Civil War, if memory serves. So,
Wow,
yeah.
that's awesome.
Yep.
David, this was so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank
I'm
you.
In a few minutes, I'm going to ask you for some final thoughts and if how people can reach you.
Sure.
But I end every podcast with what I call the Mary question. This
Yep.
came from my friend Jay Armstrong. He was an honors English teacher in the Philadelphia area, and he's now retired. But when he was teaching, he would give his students the lyrics to Thunder Road. They
Mhm.
would read it as if it was a poem, and they would discuss the themes and the imagery that Bruce portrays in the song. And then he would ask his class at the end of his students at the end of the class, does Mary get in the car? So, David, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Here's why. If you go through the lyrics, early on he says, "Don't turn me home again." These people, these Singer and Mary, they have a relationship. They've been down this road before, literally or figuratively, depending on how you want to put it.
Yeah.
Talking about all the redemption I can offer is beneath the sturdy hood. What the heck is that for a woman? You're gonna latch onto that? It's not. If you go through the lyrics, for the most part, it's about him, right?
Yes.
The thing you bet about her. Hey, you're all right. Yeah, that's really going to make someone get in a car? I
Yeah.
don't think so. Okay. At the end of the day, it seems to me that she's going to regret that choice, that he is indeed pulling out of there and he will win. And she will wish that she had gone with him.
That is a great answer. That is so
Thank
good.
you.
So David, if someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
Let's see. I do have an email.
Okay.
It's home at gmail.com. It's WILSONSHOME at gmail.com. You can find me at facebook.com/the1Dave.
Okay.
So those are probably the two most obvious ways that I
Very
can.
nice.
And I should note that I do have all the papers I mentioned. You can find them on Academia. It's a website that specializes in publishing papers. So they're around. I think a number of them are also on Scribd as well. That's more for books and so on, but the papers are around. You can find them.
Very nice. Any final thoughts?
This has been a great experience. I look forward to seeing where Bruce is going from here. We're just drowning in stuff at the moment after the 7 albums came out. He's talking about tracks for 3. And of course, next month, it's Deliver Me From Nowhere and the
I
Extended
I
Nebraska soundtrack. This guy is 50+ years into his career and he's putting out all this stuff. What the heck? Who can
yeah,
keep up?
I did mean to ask you, what were your thoughts on the box set?
I mean, I can understand why the albums were set aside. I'd rather have them than not have them,
Yeah.
especially the early stuff, because I'm familiar with a lot of the 1983 recordings from bootlegs. It's nice to have them in better sound for sure. Some of them I could live without, but at least you have the option. You get a broader sense of what he was up to and the way he delved into different genres, if only to give himself the opportunity to broaden his musical horizons. We know he did that with Western Stars. We didn't know that he did it with all those other albums, like
Yeah.
Somewhere
I
North of Nashville or Inyo or whatever.
yeah, I did not know I wanted a crooner album from Bruce Springsteen,
All
but
right.
I'm glad I have it.
And you got Twilight Hours, you can play it to your heart's contents.
Exactly. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Guys, dig up the papers. They're fascinating. You were great, my friend.
I appreciate that.
Anytime you want to come back, just let me know.
Sounds
Okay.
great.
All right, listeners, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.